Somewhere he cometh.
Hello.
Alrighty.
Sorry for the delay. I was
I
having
could
some
use
technical
louder.
difficulties.
Hey, we're
Louder.
excited you're here.
Hi.
All good.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Well,
Got a
I
good
guess,
crowd, and I
yeah.
believe I bought your last bottle of wine this afternoon. So,
Oh,
Well, I'll tell you, we'll absolutely have it back.
oh, good. Okay.
That is one that's sort of a year round.
there.
Well, good to see everybody, and glad you're all here.
Well,
And
we want to be muted, unmuted, probably.
here comes Jack, so everybody behave themselves.
Uh-oh.
We are really grateful to have this opportunity to learn more about wine. And of course, we always have to give a shout out to Capital Federal and Sharon and David Katzman for funding Retroactive and all the fun we get to have once a month tasting wine, especially Steve for his amazing expertise. And I guess we're going to learn something about this Lang Winery. And I did read up on it. It sounds wonderful.
It is, yeah, I have to say, Lang is one of the wineries that truly sold me on this wonderful place that is the Willamette Valley. So real quick, we can kind of go over some Willamette Valley. We were there about a week ago. We heard this speech many times, so I think I can probably rehash it. The Willamette Valley is an amazing place. It has and I speak for wine specifically, but it's amazing for many reasons. Specifically, it has a lot of the requirements. It meets a lot of the requirements that great wine regions ask for. One being complexity of soil. You know, the wine is made in a vineyard. It's cared for and shepherded into a bottle by the winemaker, and that is in no way a simple feat. It takes years of really thoughtful consideration, awareness, science. I mean, there's so many skill sets that are required to really pull off a great bottle of wine, but it begins in the vineyard. And Willamette Valley is special in that respect. Size wise, it's about 60 miles wide and about 150 miles long. It starts roughly a little bit south of Portland and extends pretty close to Eugene. So it's a large area, relatively speaking. I mean, to provide context, Napa Valley is about 5 to 8 miles wide and 30 to 35 miles long. So you could fit many Napas in this footprint. But so it has a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of things at play here. First of all, kind of the things that created this soil. And if you look behind me, this is actually one of Lang's vineyards. It's their estate vineyard. And if you see, you know, off to my left, the soil is red. And that's not true for all of Willamette. It's particularly true for a sub-region called the Dundee Hills. But that soil is, in fact, it's got its own name. It's called Jory, Jory. It is the byproduct of basaltic lava flows that get dried, ground down into fine powder mixed with clay, but it has a lot of mineral content, and iron being one of them. It turns the soil red. So the soil in this part of, particularly in Dundee Hills, this Jory, very well drained. Grapes don't like wet feet. They don't want in most cases, there are some grapes that don't mind it, but generally grapes prefer well draining soil. They also don't want it to be overly nutritious, or at least the people who are buying the wine don't want the soil to be overly nutritious, because if the grapes aren't struggling, they produce a lot of sugars and flavors and size, but it's not the goal is to actually restrict yield. It's not to encourage yield. So you don't want soil that's abundantly fertile. And so you have good drainability, you have low fertility, you have elevation. As you can see, actually the day we were there was absolutely spectacular. We could see Mount Hood in the distance. This time of year, actually many times of year, fog or cloud cover prevents that. I've talked to a lot of friends who have been to Lang, and very few of them have ever seen Mount Hood off the tasting room. But so elevation, that's another important thing, because that allows for airflow, and again, drainage causes the vines to have to struggle for water. Jori soil in particularly, although it drains very well, it actually is really dialed in on the amount of moisture it retains. So in many great wine regions around the world, the rain does not come in the summertime, because you don't want the rain in the summertime. It could cause mold or mildew or rot that would compromise the quality of your grapes. So you really do want grapes, your water to show up in the wintertime. And but so if that's the case, you obviously need the water to be retained in some level, keeping the roots dry but moisture in the soil. Jori does that beautifully. So Willamette, kind of back to the general Willamette Valley. Willamette Valley created, soil-wise, you've got volcanic activity. You've got the two plates, the continental plates, crashing into each other. You've got wind and water erosion. So you've got a lot of things that are mixing up the soils, creating complex soils, changing the soils from place to place. And the bottom line is, that's the magic. There's so much space here to do great things. The grapes really, when they're kind of thought out, they love being here. You can taste it in the wine. So it really is just an amazing place. Now specifically to Lang. So the go back to the history of Willamette Valley. It really wasn't, there were people who were planting grapes in the 70s, but few and far between. Very few people were doing much at that time. And mostly it was you were cultivating hazelnuts or tree fruits like apples or pears.
Yeah.
Maybe stone fruits like cherries, peaches, apricots, but you were not growing grapes, more than likely. And around the mid-'80s, there was a group of people. They're really kind of viewed as the OG winemakers of Napa. Everybody, you kind of have to lower your head when the remaining living ones pass by. But guys like David Lett, the original winemaker for Irie. Dick Erath, Dick Adelsheim, lots of people who were starting, and this would have been early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, getting going and believing in this. And so when Don and Wendy Lang, the matriarch and patriarch of the family, when they showed up in the late 80s, they went immediately to these OG winemakers. They went to David Lett and said, "Hey, we're thinking about planting a vineyard. What would you suggest?" And in this, one of the things that we kind of were told over time, many times over while we were there, was that there is a very much a collaborative vibe in Oregon. Everybody wants to help everybody else. You don't find it everywhere. it seems to me sort of Midwest-like. And so that helpful, that we're all in this together attitude means, really, because nobody has to reinvent the wheel every time they want to do something, the quality has benefited from that. Everybody is doing well because everybody is doing well, and that vibe is rooted like their vines. So in the 80s, the Langs had as their advisors really the best minds, the ones that had already learned a lot of lessons the hard way and could convince them of doing things. Well, try this. We tried it, didn't work out. You try that. And so the success of this winery is really a testament to, the original people. Again, these 5 winemakers who were really kind of, hanging their ass out over the edge, so proverbially speaking, and risking everything, but also sharing everything that they learned and passing along the benefit that they incurred the risk for. So really cool people. So this winery really today is a product of that. That's where it began. Today, the winery is run by Jesse Lang, the son. Now, Don Lang, the father, still makes wine. He still conveys his opinions. He likes certain things that Jesse maybe doesn't always like, but because they both are really cool guys and really committed to this venture, they get along great and they work well, and they acknowledge that each of them have things to bring to the table, and their wines show it. So I've this is a winery that I've known. I didn't know them when they first started, but I probably first had them in the early to mid 90s. And after I got back from this most recent trip, I was talking to some people in the trade who have been there many, many times, and several of them said, actually, it was Don Lang. Jesse was still cutting his teeth at the time, but it was Don Lang who sold them on Willamette and convinced them that this was a beautiful place, and made them love it. I mean, you can't love wine and not love Willamette. I mean, it's just too good of a place to overlook. So with that, let's taste some wine. So the first wine that we have today is the 2022 Lang. It is their Classique line. The Classique is, and this is done. This is not uncommon, but oftentimes wineries that are fairly small production, which Lang most certainly is, will have wines that are used more for national distribution. So if Lang wanted to get a by the glass program at a restaurant somewhere, the Classique line, and they do a Pinot Gris. I think they do a Chardonnay under that, and they do a Pinot Noir. And these are wines that they're purchasing fruit from some of their friends, using excess fruit from their estate. But these are wines. The Classique line is more for national distribution, so that they have something to sell you when you go to their winery. But I've loved this line. I think it offers incredible value, and I even looked into, well, okay, if they're not growing the fruit themselves, where are they sourcing it? And true to every wine, I mean, many of the wines they make, you go and you look up the vineyard sites that they're buying fruit, and they too. I mean, they're not the level of Irie Vineyards or Elk Cove, but they're vineyards that were planted in the 80 to 90 year, I mean, in the late 80s, early 90s, or mid 80s, early 90s. So he's still, I mean, even the Langs today, even when they're making their nationally distributed larger production wine, they're still using pedigreed fruit from relationships that they've cultivated over decades. So even the stuff that's supposed to be You know, kind of, well, if you like this, you should check out our other stuff. Even their entry level stuff, I think, is really, really good. So Pinot Gris, the same varietal as Pinot Grigio. Just Gris is the French version, Grigio the Italian. Oregon, particularly Willamette Valley, does very well with this grape. Pinot Gris does very well with Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Gamay Noir. They're doing Riesling, but cool climate grapes, because in this region, the days are warm, the nights a little chilly. So if you're a grape like, say, Cabernet, that really wants a little more warmth, it's not going to do a great job here. It's a little too chilly for the cab to fully ripen and to develop the flavors that cab lovers want. But for cool climate grapes like Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, Gamay Noir, Pinot Blanc, all of the Pinot variants, this is a wonderful climate. So this comes from 3 sources. One of the sources is actually, I think, the back end of this vineyard. They do have estate fruit going into this. And then 2 other vineyards that are again planted in the late 80s. So again, well established, very good quality. This area is, aside from grapes, well known for growing apples and pears. And you know, it's funny, it's easy to, when you think about what grows here additionally, aside from grapes, you know, the environment that does well for apples and pears really yields many of those same qualities to this wine. So when you smell it, I mean, I smell apples and pears. They grow nuts in this area. Now, to me, I get more pistachio than, say, hazelnut, but the Chardonnays oftentimes, you know, you'll taste a Chardonnay from this region, and right next to the vineyard is a hazelnut, you know, orchard, grove, whatever they grow hazelnuts in. And it is, and you notice those flavors, there's similarities. And so I mean, a lot of tree fruits, again, kind of that, it's almost like pistachio gelato or something. I mean, there's a pistachio note, but citrus. You'll notice there's some bubbles that dissolve CO2. That's I like it when the wines show that. The Germans do this. They refer to it as spritzig, and it's kind of like spritzy, but that CO2 kind of blankets the wine for, you know, a little bit and protects it, and also kind of livens it up. So it burns off, but it's just, it gives that kind of, that almost, it makes the wine crunchy when you taste it. Yeah. I really, really nice, nice, delicious fruit. Mouth-watering acidity, minerality. You taste, I mean, the soils in this area, crazy complex. I mean, again, you've got all of these major you know, major entities working on this. I mean, volcanoes, crashing plates, water erosion, wind erosion. There's so much changing the soil each and every place that at turning it over, I mean, you just get a lot of minerality in the wines from this region, which minerality, in looking for it, kind of think the smell of maybe like sea salt or wet stones or wet concrete. It kind of tickles in the back of the nose, and you sense kind of you sense minerals, you sense minerality. That's kind of what you're looking for in the background of this. But tremendously food friendly. I actually did make some food today. I've got some apples. We did an apple tasting while we were there, and tried. I hadn't had it, but very tasty, an apple called Cosmic Crisp. It's a hybrid of Honeycrisp. And then Tillamook cheese. crazy good cheese. And really, again, things that grow together go together more often than not. I had a little. I hope everybody takes advantage of the mushrooms that we get in our grocery stores, because the quality of the mushrooms that we get is just awesome. I love the growers that are providing us local mushrooms. But I found some I think they're cinnamon cap mushrooms, and sauteed those down with some and topped them with little Gruyere cheese on crostini. So mushrooms, I mean, those woods behind this vineyard are just littered with all sorts of mushrooms. The restaurants, in fact, there's even a restaurant in Willamette that only serves mushrooms. So the mushrooms are crazy. So tree fruits, cheese, mushrooms, charcuterie. These wines, both of these wines, do wonderful things with that. Any thoughts about the Pinot Gris? Well, if not, we can move on to the Pinot Noir.
Comments? What was your, I'm getting comments from behind me. Hang on just a minute.
Must be somebody in the woods behind you.
So this next wine,
Not
Pinot Noir, the signature red grape of Willamette Valley. It's a grape that truly has found its home. I believe one of its very best homes in North America. I very much like California Pinot, but I don't think I like it to the level that I like Oregon Pinot. It is, and there are differences. Oftentimes people may or may not like one versus the other. California Pinot typically is a little more fruit driven, little brighter fruit. Sometimes there are other grapes blended in. There's only a 75% requirement for a bottle to be labeled as, say, Pinot Noir in California. And so oftentimes Pinot Noir can get, not always, but sometimes will get amended with things like Barbera or Zinfandel or Syrah, to kind of complete that wine. Well, in Oregon, they really do believe that everything that goes into this wine really means that they don't need any additional amendments. Pinot Noir is so happy here that it doesn't need anything else, and I tend to agree. I also like, and as you notice, there are a lot of woods in this area. You've got mountain ranges on either side of the valley, and so lots of forest. And you get sort of a forest floor, a fresh soil, that turned garden soil smell kind of lingers in the background of a lot of Oregon Pinot Noir. And I love that. I mean, that, for me, a wine should reflect the place. It should taste like where it's from. And the Pinot Noir that is grown in Willamette really, in many cases, will let you know where it's from. I mean, we tasted a ton of Pinot, but they weren't all the same. There were areas where the wines were good, but for whatever reason, the wines in another region I liked even better. And
Steve, that makes me think on the chat box, someone wrote, we visited the Willamette Valley last month. You mentioned Elk Cove. We visited there. Can you give a comparison with Lang Vineyard products? I think you're talking about that right now.
yeah,
That's
well,
a question.
and I apologize. I would have to kind of I'd have to read up on Elk Cove's current, where they're sourcing their fruit. I love Elk Cove. I've sold it. I mean, we don't sell it currently. I don't think I have any on the shelf currently. I did in Missouri, but Elk Cove is one of the old school wineries. But yeah, I can't remember. I honestly can't remember which sub AVA Elk Cove is in. If you remember that, put that in the chat, because that actually matters. I mean, like Dundee Hills, this Jory soil, they don't have it if you were to go to Eola Amity Hills. That's a different kind of soil. So Ribbon Ridge, a different soil still. The soils really change widely. And so some soils will yield wines that have brighter fruit. So you're thinking cherries and strawberries, but it's like maybe sour cherries and wild strawberries. And then other areas where it's like, wow, this is like strawberry jam. This is the strawberries and cherries in this, or black cherries and strawberry jam. So they're more concentrated. You'll notice differences in the tannic texture. Some are very light, some are sort of Goldilocks, some are like where you just, I mean, it's just tannic grip. You know that this wine, I'm almost you want a steak with this Pinot. So the ranges really change, and there are areas that are closer to water. There is a channel that brings in cold air from the ocean called the Van Duzer Gap, and that kind of sucks this cold air into the valley. So the vineyards that are close to this east-west gap that channels in this cooler, moist air, those areas will make different wine. I mean, that's Eola Amity kind of sits right near there, and so you get breezes that change. You know, when the breeze blows heavily enough on a vine, the skin gets thicker to protect the grape, and that makes a more concentrated wine. So, I mean, that alone, I mean, there's so many. I will say I could probably visit 50 different wineries. We were only able to visit 9. I could probably create a list of 50 that I would love to visit before I even got into the ones that I didn't know. There are that many great producers in this area, and certainly Elk Cove is one.
This is a question from Scott. You said the critique line is for national distribution. What's the difference in price and taste for the wine you buy directly from the vineyard?
Well, it's not that the Classique line will be a larger production line. So, you know, restaurants, as an example, I mean, largely the winery is looking specifically at restaurants. Those are some of the best places to sell wine. And so as a restaurant buyer, you really don't want, in most cases, to commit to a by the glass. Let's say you want to put Lang Pinot Gris on your menu, and you want to have it by the glass for a while. So you print new menus, announces that you're serving Lang Pinot Gris, but they only made 600 cases. They made 1,000 cases. And now their Pinot Gris is gone. Their estate Pinot Gris, you can't pour it anymore. So when what wineries will do is basically use maybe the younger fruit, more juvenile vineyards that are not probably ready to be showcased in a bottle that could retail from $40 to $80, and instead retails for $25. And so that's kind of the Classique line. They want something that they can convince a restaurant to use in their BTG program and have enough product for them to sell it maybe for 6 months. A lot of restaurants will change up their menu, you know, maybe quarterly sometimes, or at least hopefully twice a year, because they're vastly different wines from the beginning to the end. But yeah, this will allow the restaurants to not have to worry about supply. So that's really this classique line. Much of what Lang produces is in that $40 to $80 range. And that's the reserve line, this Pinot. Now they do make a classique Pinot, and it's very tasty, but it does not have the depth that this wine has. I mean, it is again designed to be in a by the glass pour. You probably, people are going to be less inclined to want to spend, say, $40 on a glass of wine versus maybe 22. I mean, if they were pouring the estate line and it wasn't classique, yeah, it would probably be a 40 some dollar glass of wine, which would definitely crimp sales a little bit. So I mean, it really, we're always, I mean, I think that wineries kind of entry level wines, to me tell me a lot, because number one, they tell me, do they value the customer who is buying this entry level wine? And there are wines that I would argue they don't care. The entry level wines are really just not worth anybody's time. And so I have to assume that maybe a little that same thought process went in when they were designing the more expensive wines. So I think entry level wines, we'd call them kind of a core line, but a line that would go out nationally to a lot of stores, a lot of retailers, a lot of restaurants. When their core line is good, it's going to be really, really impossible for them unlikely, not impossible, but unlikely for them to send out really trash higher end wine. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I love all of their wines. Their classique Pinot is excellent, but it was sort of selfish. I wanted to showcase this wine just because I think it does a brilliant job and just to point this out, this is not their highest tier wine, but this is a wine that I think showcases what they do best and creates a wine that really does capture the place. So the wine is sourced from multiple vineyards, including the one you see behind me. The vineyards that they do not own, again, relationships they've had for a really long time. Growers that have been around since, in some cases, the late 70s. And not everybody makes wine. I mean, there are a lot of growers who that's all they do. They just want one job. They don't want two. And so Lang reaches out to all these growers who today, I mean, their vineyards are spectacular, and that's all they do. So this is a blend from their estate, but also from several very pedigreed, established vineyards, all 22 vintage. Not all from the Dundee Hills. There's some areas that south from here in McMinnville. There's some they vary the elevation, and really, I mean, that's a tribute to Don and Jesse. I mean, when they get together and they blend individual barrels. And I guess I probably should point that out. So if you're looking at the vineyard behind me, when this vineyard is harvested, it's not that they're going through and just picking tonnage. They're going through and picking very specific areas that they then separate. So every row is part of a block. Every block is probably barreled together. And then after the wines have fermented and settled out, then they will go and assemble the wine. And so, let's say they discover that the vines that are over my right shoulder, those just did wonderfully. But the vines that you can see immediately over my left shoulder, for whatever reason, they weren't as great. So the the best juice will go to, I mean, they want to isolate barrels so that they can isolate where this came from and the quality that's going in. And so when they're blending, they're looking at, well, okay, this wine has structure. Think of structure, that kind of that dry tannin, walnut skin, dark chocolate, coffee, that astringent flavor. All wine needs that, all red wine needs that as a backbone. But let's say, I mean, when I was smelling this wine, I mean, you can smell, I smell cherries. I smell raspberry jam. I smell some sort of wood, maybe cedar. I smell peonies. I don't know why I'm getting peonies, but I smell some floral. I smell apricot skin. There's a lot going on in this wine. And it is unlikely that one vineyard would provide all of those characteristics. So when they're producing the reserve wine, they're taking the best barrels from the vineyards that they consider to be the best and assembling it based on a vintage. So, one vintage might need more color, another one might need more alcohol, another one, well, it smells like fruit, but we do need some floral aspect, or we need some earthiness. And so they can source those grapes. They can source those barrels from their stock and then blend in what each wine needs. And I think that aside from growing beautiful fruit, the Langs do a brilliant job blending. So let's taste this guy.
What would you suggest? Gwen asks, friend Joan asks, the best food for this wine. What would you
So
suggest there?
so Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris, and Chardonnay, all of the cool climate grapes, they really all have a lot to offer food. Typically, what we generally are looking for in wine is a level of acidity that matches the food. So you've got something that's super rich, big and fatty, you kind of want some tannin, because if the wine has no tannin, you would taste the wine next to this, piece of short rib, and it would taste ridiculously thin. It would taste like you were drinking water. So you need some of that dryness, that tannin, to stand up to the richness of the food. But then you also want some acidity to cause your mouth to water and to wash that fat off your tongue and kind of refresh it. I mean, think about all of, most foods that we really love have a good acid component. I mean, as you're balancing your flavors, particularly in sauces, you need, sweet, sour, salty, bitter, spice, umami. You have to hit all of those levels. And Pinot Noir particularly has a lot going for food. So it's got good tannin. It's got great acidity. It has that, particularly if you're enjoying things that do have that umami, that richness, mushrooms, things that have really, dark blue veined cheeses, things that have a lot of flavor going on, strong flavor. Pinot does wonderful things with it. And I will say my most favorite wine to have at Thanksgiving, red wine, is Pinot Noir. Sometimes Gamay Noir. There's some really delicious Beaujolais, Cru Beaujolais. The Nouveau is delicious too, but the Cru Beaujolais is really that elevation is delicious. But these wines, so going back to the things that grow together, go together. I mean, you've got in the woods here, you've got elk, you've got venison. Those are delicious. You have various, partridge, birds of some kind. Farm raised chicken, farm raised turkey, pheasant. I mean, quail, various things that are raised or that show up in the woods. Pork. Pinot loves pork. The pig is a giver, and Pinot is well aware. So I mean, everything from pork chops to pulled pork. I mean, bacon. If you go to Burgundy, you know, the pig shows up in a lot of different ways and a lot of different preparations, just to add kind of that richness. But duck, brilliant with duck. There's so many things. I mean, beef is good, but I would say it would have to be the right Pinot. It would have to be from a certain place that had some good structure. You want some firm tannins on that. But no, this wine with you know, a smoked pork chop or a seared duck breast or salmon done a number of different ways. Things that grow together go together, and this wine just will embrace that. But yeah, roast turkey, ham, so many things that go on the turkey table are gonna be just turned on to this wine. I mean, this wine is just gonna elevate those flavors and really cause them to pop.
Good. You're making me
Yeah.
hungry.
Well, I like I said, these wines really very versatile, delicious. I mean, this Pinot is, I mean, there's so much going on this in this wine. I mean, there's now I'm getting a little cherry cola. I mean, that's why I love Pinot so much. I mean, Pinot is not a one-trick pony. And you know, I was reading, it's funny, before we got on, I pulled up the website just to see where exactly they were sourcing the fruit, and they had reviews from national reviewers, for-profit wine critics. And I was reading some of the notes, and very few of them actually lined up identically. I mean, there were actually none of them lined up identically. And but that actually is a huge compliment, because everybody has a different arsenal of or, you know, has a different flavor and aroma library. And I mean, every person, they're all unique. They're based on our history, our experiences, our likes, our palates, all sorts of things that make our list unique to one human on the planet. And so to see in the reviews that they really varied widely, they were all, I mean, I don't think we've gotten, well, I can tell the wines that I mean, the wine reviews that were written by a chatbot. I mean, there's certain tells. And I'm certain some of that does go on, but the references that they're making, I mean, I was like, yeah, I can kind of see that. I don't see that, but I do see that. But the complexity offers a lot. There's a lot going on with these wines, and you know, now I'm tasting cranberry. I mean, it really just goes just everywhere. So many good flavors, but
Sounds like a good Thanksgiving wine for sure.
oh, most certainly. No, I mean, Thanksgiving, you know, the table is got a ton of stuff on it, and you really want to find that wine that isn't just, you know, doesn't work with one thing, it works well for multiple things. And Pinot is that it there's variety of proteins, herbal, doesn't mind vegetables. Some wines definitely mind vegetables, but it's just, yeah, it's just a wonderful all-purpose Swiss Army wine, you know.
Sounds wonderful. How does everybody like it, I wonder? Those of you that are trying it. Oh, I see a thumb up one in one of the, oh, there's another thumb. Three thumbs.
Yeah. No, and I would say I strongly, if you happen to be out this way, absolutely, you know, visit Lang. These the people that work there, the people who are creating these products, I mean, really are just like I said, I've traveled to many places, many wine regions around the world, and there are not a lot that I would describe as like the people who are working there like Midwest people. They're very, I mean, there are a handful of places that are kind of Midwesty, but there are times where I'll kind of visit a place and it's like that those guys are very Midwesty. I mean, they're the people in this area generally are very yeah, people you want to party with. Good folks. Really good folks. You will eat and drink very well, even on your worst day. Their standards are ridiculously high. And I love it.
Speaking of Midwesty, and this is just me asking, um, so here we are, all of us Lawrencians right here in the middle of the Midwest. Um, Tell me about Kansas wines. I mean,
Um,
they're popping up everywhere. Just wondered how, I mean, like they don't have Andaluvian basaltic soil.
right.
How
Well,
how is
actually, no,
Kansas?
no, so I've got, I mean, there are a number of thoughts on that. I think that the challenge to the growers in Kansas is that I mean, like, I guess so. As an example, when the Langs wanted to buy this property or wanted to start a winery, they didn't buy the property first. They figured out what they wanted to do and they matched the property to that. And that generally will yield success. I think the challenge that Kansas wineries face is that there there is definitely good advice from longtime growers. That I mean, there have been people who are growing grapes in Kansas for a long time. And I know, I mean, I've had really great examples of Kansas wine. I have. I mean, it's not that it doesn't exist. But what I see to be sort of a challenge is wineries will buy property and then become a winery. And that's it's going to be luck if it works out because in the entirety of the Willamette Valley where you have wines that, it's not even up for debate anymore. The wines are collected by people all over the world, you know, tasted blindly against the best examples of other Pinots from around the world, and they win. I mean, and yet, even though the odds are really good that if you started a winery in Willamette Valley, you would end up with a great winery, um, they're still not 100%. They're probably not even 50-50. I mean, and so I guess that's my issue. I think I can, I'll see a vineyard that's planted in some of the most fertile soil that Kansas has to offer. And I don't really even need to be curious about the wine to know that that's probably not going to be that great because that is the most hospitable place you could grow grapes. And in the broader wine world around the world, that would be the last place you'd want to plant them. And so I think there's that. That there is a lot of wine that is made simply because the people own the property and not because the property wants to grow grapes. Grapes are I mean, they're very fickle. They really they know exactly where they want to grow and where they don't. And so there are those challenges. The other challenge is I think that, at the end of the day, it is a business. And it has to, so the people who are planting vineyards in Kansas right now probably are not thinking, you know what I want to sell? I want to sell $120 bottle of Kansas wine from this property. And because that would be absurd if they said they wanted to. It most likely, as a business move, would not work. Our beef might sell for trophy prices. Our wheat is spectacular. I mean, there are other products that we sell that command top dollar, but I don't think our wine would. And so the places that Kansas wineries need to focus on things that are not, how can I make the very, very best wine that has ever been consumed in Kansas? And more so, how can I keep the lights on? How can I create a product that I can sell, and how can I support my family? And those, I would say, those are different challenges.
Yeah.
If I were planting a vineyard in Kansas, I actually do. This is kind of crazy, but you know, I'm saying this admittedly out of my ignorance of the specificities of viticulture in Kansas. But generally speaking, there are certain grapes that absolutely love limestone. And we can't excavate a basement for, a house without mining out limestone. So I would probably look for a place with elevation. It would probably look like, I mean, if I could plant grapes like where I-70 saws its way through those rocky hills, in the Flint Hills, where you can just see it's limestone for 30 feet. I don't know. Like, my gut says, if I could take over a little plot in the Flint Hills that had that soil, and plant, probably there's a hybrid grape that likes our climate called Sauvignon Blanc. I'd probably plant Sauvignon Blanc in the Flint Hills. But I would make most of my wine sweet. And I would have a beautiful venue where people could come and relax and luxuriate and look at nature, and the wine would probably be secondary. But no, it's a challenge. The other issue that faces winemakers in this region is, you growing grapes and making wine are two different skill sets. And so somebody who's a brilliant farmer may be a horrendous winemaker. I mean, if you think about it, the guy who raises that cut of beef that you dream about after eating, may not be a Michelin-starred chef being able to execute a perfect, cook on that cut of beef. I mean, they really are different skill sets. And so I think that's the challenge. There's a lot to think about when planning a winery in Kansas. And it extends beyond whether you're going to make like the greatest wine there ever was, or whether you're going to make a place that sells a product you're proud of and provides money.
Can I make a comment that's a little hard to put in the chat?
Absolutely.
I kind of agree with what you say, but I think taste has a lot to do with it. And my example is Missouri wines, because those Germans picked the land they wanted to do, and they were producing wine that was loved all over the country before Prohibition. And then California wines came in where they could replicate European wines, and our taste changed.
Yeah.
So the Missouri wines, and we make very similar wines here, are wines that are unbelievable, some of them within their category of wines. They win gold medals, but it's a category of wine that's not as popular as a Pinot Noir or a Chardonnay, which we can't grow. And I think that's, in all fairness to the Midwest, we were great wine producers at one time. And at the same time, we were drinking Chianti and upstate New York sweet wines, and they were very competitive, if not better. And now that's not the case, because people say, well, that's not a Chardonnay, or that's not a Pinot Noir, or that's not a, whatever it is that I can get from California.
Right. No, I agree. I think that the challenges that wineries in our area have to kind of face is, and I, like I said, I have had outstanding Kansas and Missouri wines. I mean, really, they're different, and they're different for one very understandable reason. Most of the wines that we consume, I mean, most of the ones anybody is familiar with, Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, they're all part of this same European family of grapes, Vitis vinifera. Most of the vines that do well in our part of the United States are not vinifera vines. They're hybrids. They may have some vinifera in them, but they incorporate grapes that don't mind. I mean, if you think about, most of these vinifera vines grew up in the Mediterranean. Our climate is not that. We have really cold winters, really hot summers. We get rain in the summertime. Um, we have dry wind. I mean, we don't have an ideal location for grapes. So in order to get them to work, we do have to find grapes that have qualities that will match where we're growing. And to Jack's point, I mean, they're different grapes. They're different categories. I mean, Chamberson, Norton, these are grapes that do well in this area. Vignoles, Sèvres Blanc. They're grapes that do well in this area, but they're not, you would not put any of them up against the wines that we get from California. So if the consumer is open to trying new things, and generally speaking, sweeter wines appeal to more people in their early stages of wine drinking. Dry wines, dry wines, you go into a coffee shop, you will certainly see people who are getting, a double shot of espresso, but you'll also see a lot of people who are getting milk and cream and other things added, amendments to their coffee, because they don't want to drink like a coffee that requires a steak knife. And so there are the sweeter wines that typically are made, and actually most wineries that are I would consider good wineries, regional wineries, most of them do have dry versions. I mean, they're not just making sweeter wines, but again, as a business, the people who are coming out to their wineries on the weekends and who are hanging out with them and spending money with them, if they didn't like the sweeter wines, they wouldn't return. And they do return because the quality of the wine that they're growing. I mean, the local grapes, the grapes that are dialed into this area, do very well. They taste a little differently than the ones that say we're drinking today. But no, I think that, I mean, I encourage people to visit wineries all the time. I think that, it should be about a place. I mean, I do sort of diverge. There are certain wineries in Kansas that don't grow any of their own grapes, and the grapes, in fact, many of them are not even from Kansas. And I don't believe that a farm winery in Kansas, and that farm winery is a term, a legal term, should be able to be a farm winery producing only 25% of their own stuff. And that is actually the law. Like, so and that was not done by the people that run farm wineries. That was done by large corporations that wanted to make sure they could sell wine in Kansas as a farm winery, and but are bringing in fruit from Missouri and Arkansas and maybe Colorado to supplement what they grow in Kansas. That's just my personal thing. But wineries like Holyfield and Baser and Davenport and Eudora, they're, whatever they're doing, it's coming from their property. Their wine, their grapes are grown there, and they're proud to sell you a product that they created. And I mad respect for that.
Yeah, I guess our time is up, but it makes me think of the Lewisburg cider mill.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I own a cider press, and for over 30 years we had a cider party making every fall called the Big Squeeze.
Mhm.
And we got all kinds of apples from everywhere and was wonderful. And I remember taking kids to the Lewisburg cider mill, and they had boxes and boxes and boxes of apples from I don't know where.
Yeah.
Just didn't seem right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Kansas and Missouri used to be one of the main sources for tree fruits in the Midwest, and we got out of that business and switched to other things. But yeah, I guess the other thing I might consider if I were setting up a farm alcohol beverage business would be, maybe I'd get into making hard cider because
Yeah,
apples and pears do grow very well here, and certainly in Oregon, the cideries are popping up everywhere. And so unfortunately there is actually a glut of tree fruits in the United States, and so
yeah.
there's a lot of good fruit to be turned into cider.
Maybe we should look at those ciders sometime. And if you want to talk a
Absolutely.
little business, come see me. I've got some
Yes.
really old wonky trees that we actually grew from apple seeds.
Oh, that's
Um,
wonderful.
I know, it's real Johnny Appleseed stuff going on. Everybody, thank you so much for being here tonight. You all look like you're having a great time. I can't wait to go home and have one too. I might stop off and get myself a bottle of wine. Thank you, Steve. My gosh, you
Thank
did
you.
so much. And everybody, thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time, which I'm hoping is, I have the date here. We'll have to talk about the date, but it should be our regular scheduled time, right? Next time.
Mhm. Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, everybody have a wonderful weekend and
Thank you.
enjoy your wine. Thank you for
Thank
being
you
here.
all. Have a wonderful day.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night.